I want you to close your eyes for a second. I want you to imagine a destination, but don't imagine a hotel lobby or a pool, not just yet. I want you to picture silence, like
Mm.
absolute ringing silence. You're standing in a landscape that looks less like Earth and more, I don't know, like a set from The Martian or Dune.
Right, I can see it.
It's vast, it's red. There are these towering sandstone pillars just rising out of the sand, all jagged and carved by the wind over millions of years. And the sky is that piercing, high altitude blue. It feels ancient, it feels completely untouched.
Like you're the first person there.
Exactly, like you're the first person to ever set foot there.
That is the dream, right? That is the Instagram version. That's the breathless architectural rendering come to life.
That's it. That is the screensaver. That's the hook.
Mhm.
But now, okay, I want you to keep your eyes closed, but just pan the camera in your mind, maybe 10 degrees to the left.
Okay.
Just out of that perfect frame, there's a waiter in a pristine uniform holding a tray, and on it is a cold towel scented with, I don't know, lavender and bergamot.
Huh. Of course there is.
And there's a private plunge pool reflecting those ancient rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look down at the bill in your hand and you realize that this silence, this feeling of being the only person on Mars, is costing you about 3,000 US dollars
A night.
a night.
And that right there is the tension we are going to be living in for the next hour.
It really is.
We're exploring a place that is, I think, arguably the most ambitious and maybe the most confusing tourism project on the planet right now. All right. We are talking about AlUla in Saudi Arabia.
But we aren't just, reviewing a travel destination. We're not just here to say, go here, eat this.
No.
We're looking at this bigger emerging concept of Red Sea ancient resorts. It's this fascinating kind of wild mix of deep, deep history, extreme luxury,
Right.
and well, what happens when a country decides to pivot its entire global identity in the span of 5 years?
It raises such a fundamental question, one that just hovered over every single page of the research we did for this. Is this destination a real place? I mean, a place that you can actually visit, navigate, and sort of understand?
Or is it something else?
Or is it, as our source material hints, a mirage?
Ha.
Is it just this beautiful, shimmering image that's been constructed for the ultra-wealthy that just dissolves if you try to get too close or try to touch it?
And to help us answer that, we have a really, really interesting set of source materials for this deep dive. We're analyzing a travel guide that features two very distinct, very loud voices. First up, we have Phil.
Phil.
Phil is the cynic. He's the guy who checks the plumbing. He is obsessed with logistics, with budgets, with the gritty reality of getting from point A to point B.
We all need a Phil in our lives, you know? He's the voice of reason, or at least the voice of the bank account.
Definitely the voice of the wallet. If Phil sees a beautiful sunset, he's the one asking how much the parking costs to see it. And then we have H. H is the optimist. She's there for the culture, the vibe, the spiritual connection to the history. She's the one who's willing to overlook a $20 latte because the light hitting the rocks is just so soul-stirring.
And what's so useful about having these two perspectives is that they help us triage the truth. Because when you look at a project this massive, and this state-funded, I mean,
Yeah.
the marketing hype is deafening.
It's everywhere.
It's slick, it's everywhere. You need someone like H to tell you if the beauty's actually real, but you desperately need someone like Phil to tell you if you're going to, go bankrupt or freeze to death trying to experience it.
So our mission today really is to answer that ultimate question. Is AlUla the next Petra? Is it this new world wonder? Or is it just a sandbox for the 1%? We're going to unpack the costs, the safety realities, and something our sources call the pioneer tax, which I think is a concept everyone needs to know about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to start by zooming way, way out. Because you just can't understand AlUla without understanding the massive machine that is building it.
Right. The big why now question. I mean, this place has been there for thousands of years. The tombs are 2,000 years old. Why is it suddenly on every influencer's feed in, 2024, 2025?
This is the physical manifestation of Vision 2030.
Okay, let's unpack that. Vision 2030. It's a term we hear a lot in geopolitical news, right? Usually it involves oil prices or diplomatic summits. But what does it actually mean for a traveler? Why should you, listening at home, care about a government policy document?
Well, think about it like the existential anxiety of a nation. For decades, Saudi Arabia's entire economy was, for all intents and purposes, dependent on oil. It was a petrostate.
Mm-hmm.
But the leadership there knows, I mean, they're not naive, they know the oil age won't last forever. Whether it's because of climate change policies or peak oil demand, the clock is ticking. Vision 2030 is the master plan to diversify the economy before that oil money runs out. And a huge, massive pillar of that plan is tourism.
But they have a pretty big problem, don't they? They're basically starting from scratch.
From zero, exactly. They are so late to the party. I mean, look at their neighbors. Jordan has Petra. That's a global brand. Everybody knows the Treasury building from Indiana Jones.
Right. It's iconic.
It's iconic. Egypt has the pyramids. I mean, these are titans of tourism. Saudi Arabia is sitting on the exact same geology, the same history, the Nabatean civilization, the very same people who built Petra.
Yeah.
But it's been closed off to the world for religious and cultural reasons for so long.
So now they're playing catch-up.
A very, very expensive game of catch-up. They are pouring billions, literal billions with a beat of dollars into infrastructure to pivot from basically zero tourism to ultra-luxury in about 5 years.
The speed of it is what's staggering. You usually see destinations evolve organically over decades. Backpackers find a beach, then a little hostel opens.
Yeah, then a boutique hotel.
Then the Four Seasons shows up 20 years later. It's skipping all the middle steps.
Precisely. They are trying to leapfrog the entire backpacker trail phase. They don't want the college kids on a shoestring budget. They're aiming straight for the high net worth individual immediately. And that brings us to this concept of the Red Sea corridor.
This was something in the sources that I found really interesting. It's not just about the desert, is it? It's a package deal they're selling.
No, it's a strategy of retention, a strategy of containment almost.
Yeah.
They know that a lot of travelers, especially coming from Europe or the U.S., they want a beach holiday.
Sure.
So they're building these Maldives-style islands on the Red Sea coast. That's the Red Sea Project. Overwater villas, pristine coral reefs, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing. You can get a beach in the Maldives. You can get a beach in the Caribbean.
Right. It's not unique.
It's not unique. To make Saudi Arabia a world-class destination, you need a hook. You need something only you have. You need culture.
So AlUla is the hook.
AlUla is the anchor. The idea, the grand plan, is to capture the traveler for a full itinerary. You fly in, you spend 3 nights in the high desert of AlUla, soaking up the ancient history and that silence we talked about. And then you take a short flight or a drive over to the coast for 4 nights of luxury diving and spa treatments. It creates this corridor of luxury. The goal is to keep you and your wallet inside that Saudi ecosystem for your entire vacation.
It's a closed loop. They want to keep you in their bubble.
Exactly. And that leads directly to this tension between expectation and reality. The hype, as pushed by all the Vision 2030 marketing, is ancient, untouched mystery. They want you to feel like you're an explorer discovering a lost civilization.
But the reality, according to our source, Phil, is that it's an active construction site with 5-star service.
It's a resort bubble. That is the key phrase Phil uses again and again. You have to understand, you're not visiting a country in the traditional sense. You are visiting a curated zone.
So let's talk about what happens when you actually arrive in that zone. Because the sources describe an experience that is, well, it's not like landing at Heathrow or JFK. It's not even like landing in Dubai.
Not at all. You fly into AlUla International Airport, code ULH. The source describes it as sleek, small, almost boutique. It feels more like a private terminal. It's clearly designed to handle a very specific, very select type of clientele. You aren't going to see massive jumbo jets unloading thousands of package tourists here.
And the first thing that hits you when you walk out isn't the noise of a taxi rank.
It's the silence.
And the cars.
And the cars. This is a great detail from Phil. He mentions that when you walk out of the terminal, you don't see that chaotic line of yellow cabs or people shouting, "Taxi, taxi."
Yeah.
You see a pristine, silent parade of white Land Cruisers and black Lexus SUVs.
That paints a picture immediately. It sounds incredibly orderly, but also really expensive.
It is. Phil makes the point that if you haven't prearranged your transfer with your hotel, you are basically in trouble. There is no Uber queue. There is no bus to hop on. You're either getting into one of those white SUVs or you are essentially nowhere.
So you get in your high-end SUV and you start the drive towards the Ashar Valley where most of the big resorts are. And looking out the window, the landscape just changes. The source says it transforms from flat, boring scrub into these massive sandstone pillars. Looks like Mars, is the direct quote.
That visual is key. But H, our optimist source, she emphasizes something else about that drive. She talks about the haunting silence. She mentions that the silence is so deep you forget about politics, you forget about the news, you forget about the noise of the world. It's an immediate decompression.
That sounds incredible. I think we all crave that kind of disconnection. But there is a flip side to this beautiful isolation, isn't there? The sources describe the geography as feeling trapped.
This is a crucial logistical insight. When you look at the photos on Instagram, you see a hotel room right next to a giant, amazing rock. So you assume, oh, I'll just walk out of my room and wander through the desert.
Yeah, you think you can just go for a hike?
Right. But Phil points out that nothing is close to anything else. The scale is massive. It's a 30 to 45-minute drive from the airport to the Eshar Valley. It's another 20 minutes between the old town and the main historical site, Hegra.
So you aren't just strolling down the street to grab a coffee.
There is no street. There is just desert and perfect paved roads connecting these luxury nodes. You are either in your resort, or you are in a car, or you are at a specific ticketed site. You are trapped in a painting, as Abe puts it poetically.
A beautiful painting, but still trapped.
It's beautiful, but you can't really interact with it freely. Phil corrects her phrasing to something a little more direct. Trapped in a resort.
And once you arrive at that resort, the hospitality is intense.
Aggressive hospitality. That was the phrase that stuck with me.
Please don't cancel us vibes. I love that description. It feels so human, so anxious.
It really speaks to the anxiety of a new destination, trying to justify its price tag. They know they have to prove themselves. They know they're charging a fortune. So the check-in rituals are elaborate date juice, cold towels, 3 different people welcoming you by name.
Wow.
And interestingly, Phil notes they don't immediately demand a credit card for incidentals. It's all about establishing a relationship of honored guest rather than customer at the very beginning.
Which is a nice touch, I suppose, until you eventually do have to hand over that credit card. And this is where we really need to take a deep breath because, wow, the numbers.
This is the ouch factor.
We're calling this segment a financial deep dive, but to be honest, looking at these numbers, it feels more like a financial cliff dive. Let's start with the expert analysis of the high band. If I want to stay in one of those places I see all over Instagram, the banyan tree, the habitats, the ones with the private pools reflecting the rocks, what am I actually looking at?
You are looking at, for many people, a mortgage payment. For the high-end properties like Banyan Tree or Habitus, the source cites rates starting at around $1,500.
$1,500, okay.
Going up to $4,000 US dollars.
A night.
Night.
That is staggering. I mean, that's more than the Maldives. That's more than most luxury suites in New York or Paris.
And that's just the starting point. In peak season, say December, January, it goes higher. And here's the real kicker. There is no real mid-range.
But Phil mentioned something about Airstreams. Surely staying in a trailer is cheaper.
Yes, the Habitas Caravan. These are beautifully appointed Airstream trailers. And, in most parts of the world, sleeping in a trailer is the budget option. It's camping.
Right.
Here, it's $400 to $600 a night.
$600.
To sleep in a trailer. A very nice luxury trailer, to be fair. Has air conditioning and a lovely bed. But yes, and if you're looking for a hostel or a budget hotel, a Holiday Inn, forget it, it's non-existent. Phil is very, very clear on this point, he says. Backpacker budget, $0. Do not come.
That is a harsh reality check. I mean, it completely excludes a huge demographic of travelers.
It's designed to.
What about food? I mean, usually, even in expensive cities like Tokyo or Geneva, you can find a cheap shawarma or a convenience store sandwich somewhere.
Not inside the resort bubble, you can't.
Yeah.
Phil breaks down the food costs in excruciating detail. A dinner at one of the top spots, like Tama at Habitus or Mariah Social, which is run by Jason Atherton, a big-name celebrity chef, that's going to be a minimum of $150 per head.
Okay, that's London or New York fine dining prices. It's high, but it's sort of expected for that level of luxury.
It is. But then you look at the casual food. There are some cool-looking food trucks near the Old Town. Phil notes that a burger and fries from one of those trucks will cost you $25 to $35 US dollars.
Wait, for a food truck burger? That is airport pricing on steroids.
It's captive market pricing. You're in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
You cannot just walk to a competitor down the street. You pay what they charge because the alternative is, well, eating the granola bars you brought from home.
Which they did.
Which they did. And a latte, $6 to $8.
So if we try to total this all up, Phil gives us some estimates on what an actual trip costs per day.
He does. And they're eye-watering. A mid-range couple, and this is them trying to do it cheaply by staying in the Airstreams and strictly watching every single dollar they spend, is still looking at about $800 a day.
A day, and that's the budget option.
That's the budget option, the luxury traveler. You're easily looking at $3,000 a day, and it can go up from there.
This brings us to a concept that Phil calls the pioneer tax, and I think this is a really important idea for our listeners to understand, especially if you're someone who likes to be an early adopter of travel trends.
It's really the economic theory of early adoption applied to tourism.
Mm.
You are paying a premium to be somewhere before it gets ruined. You're paying for the exclusivity. You're paying for the bragging rights of being the first one in your friend group to post that photo from Hegra.
But there's a trade-off, isn't there? I mean, usually early adopters get a discount because things aren't quite finished yet. Here it seems like you pay a premium and things aren't finished.
That's it. That's the paradox. Phil explains it as the difference between hard product and soft product. The hard product, the villas, the pools, the architecture, the views themselves, is world-class. It is
Yeah.
spectacular, 10 out of 10.
No question.
But the soft product, the service speed, the consistency, the training of the staff is still catching up.
So you're paying Ritz-Carlton prices, but you might get a waiter who forgets your water 3 times.
Exactly. You are, in effect, funding their on-the-job training program. You're paying extra to be a beta tester for their entire tourism industry. The source is clear, that the staff are incredibly enthusiastic, they're kind, they're eager to please, but they don't yet have that polished, almost telepathic service instinct that you'd find in a place like the Four Seasons in Paris, where they know what you want before you even ask for it.
That is a tough pill to swallow when the bill comes at the end of a $4,000 night. But okay, let's say you have the money, you've paid the tax, you're there. How do you actually survive the trip? Because Phil calls AlUla a logistical minefield.
It really is. And he identifies 3 great traps that inexperienced travelers fall into. These are the things that will absolutely ruin your trip if you don't know about them in advance.
Okay, let's walk through these. Trap number 1, the I'll just walk fallacy.
We touched on this with the geography, but it bears repeating because it's so counterintuitive. The scale is massive. But it's not just about the distance. Phil mentioned something I hadn't even considered. Fences.
Fences in the middle of the desert.
Yes. There is a huge amount of archaeological preservation work happening,
Right.
and a lot of future development is already cordoned off. So you can't just, go for a hike point to point across the dunes. There are fences physically blocking you.
So if you're looking at a map and think, oh, I'll just walk from the old town over to that oasis trail, you might literally hit a dead end.
You will hit a fence and probably a very polite security guard. The solution, according to Phil, is mandatory. You must rent a car.
And not just rely on Uber or the hotel shuttles.
He calls Uber spotty
Yeah.
at best,
Yeah.
and says the resort shuttles operate on what he charmingly calls inshallah, time meaning God willing. It will eventually arrive.
Not ideal for a dinner reservation.
Not at all. If you want any control over your trip, you need a rental. And interestingly, he notes an SUV is preferred for status.
Of course it is. You don't want to pull up to the $4,000 a night banyan tree in a tiny little hatchback.
Exactly. Though he says a sedan works perfectly fine for the roads, the SUV is the social currency there.
Okay, so trap number 2, the dinner reservation.
This is such a classic rookie mistake. People get there and think, I'm in the middle of the desert, how busy can it be? Who else is even here?
But because there are so few good restaurants.
Scarcity. There are only about 5 cool restaurants in the entire area. And they are booked out weeks, sometimes a month, in advance by VIPs, by wealthy locals who fly in from Riyadh for the weekend, and by organized tour groups.
So what happens if you don't plan?
You eat granola bars in your room. Phil and H literally did that one night because they couldn't get a table anywhere.
Eating a granola bar in a $1,000 room is a special kind of travel tragedy.
It's a failure of planning, but it just highlights the total lack of casual walk-in options.
And trap number 3, the weekend confusion.
This is a cultural one that can trip people up. The Saudi weekend is Friday and Saturday. This means Thursday is the big party night when things are buzzing.
And Sunday's a work day.
Sunday is Monday. So if you plan your big romantic dinner for Saturday night, thinking it's the peak of the weekend, you might find that things are already winding down. Also, prayer times. While AlUla is much more relaxed than, say, Riyadh, service does still pause. You just need to be aware of the rhythm of the day.
Speaking of things you need to be aware of, let's talk about the weather. Because this was a genuine shock to me reading the source material. I think Saudi Arabia, I think heat, I think sun.
We all do. But the source explicitly and repeatedly warns about the cold.
A parka warning.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the winter months, which is the prime tourist season from about November to March, the temperature swings are violent. It can be a beautiful 30 degrees Celsius, that's 86 Fahrenheit, in the day. Perfect t-shirt weather.
Mostly.
But then the sun drops behind those giant rocks, and the temperature plummets to 5 degrees Celsius, which is about 41 Fahrenheit, at night.
That is near freezing. That's a huge drop.
It's a massive drop. And Phil describes this tragicomic scene of Tourists showing up with nothing but linen pants and bikinis, thinking they're going to a hot desert destination.
And they end up freezing.
They end up having to buy $500 cashmere scarves at the hotel gift shop just to avoid getting hypothermia at their outdoor dinner reservation.
That is a very, very expensive mistake to make.
It's physically dangerous if you aren't prepared for it. The desert at night is not a warm place. It strips the heat right out of your body.
Okay, let's pivot a bit to the vibe of the place. Because when people think of Saudi Arabia, I think they often have questions about safety and social norms, especially for women traveling. It's a country that has been in the headlines for social restrictions for decades.
Right. And H, our female perspective in the source, she tackles this head on. She's very direct and honest about her experience.
And she says it's statistically safer than Singapore.
In terms of physical safety, things like theft, violence, yes. She says it's basically non-existent. You can leave your phone on a cafe table and walk away. It will be there when you get back. Crime is just not something you worry about in that bubble.
That is refreshing. But what about the cultural comfort level, the stare factor? Did she feel uncomfortable as a Western woman?
She does mention being stared at, but she clarifies that it felt like curiosity, not aggression. It's a country that has been closed for a very long time. Seeing Western tourists, especially women, is still a novelty in many ways. It felt like the stare of, who are you and why are you here, not get out.
And the big one, the dress code. This is the #1 question I hear. Do women need to cover their hair? Can you wear shorts?
So this is where it's a tale of two cities. Inside the resort bubble, at the Banyan Tree, at Habitus, the dress code is basically Tulum or Mykonos. Bikinis at the pool are completely normal and allowed. No need to cover your hair. It feels like any luxury resort in the world.
But outside that bubble?
In the old town, or at the airport, or at the historical sites, the code switches. You need to be respectful. Shoulders and knees covered. Loose clothing is key. H recommends linen trousers and loose long-sleeved shirts. She says she felt completely comfortable and safe as long as she respected that clear boundary. It's about code switching.
There is another aspect of the vibe that might catch people off guard, though. The dry reality.
Yes. Despite all the modernization, despite the bikinis at the pool, the alcohol policy remains absolutely strict. It's a completely dry country.
So no glass of wine with that beautiful sunset.
No, mocktails only. And Phil, our budget-conscious source, points out they are very, very expensive mocktails. You're paying $20 for some fancy juice in a nice glass.
H puts a positive spin on it, though, doesn't she? She calls it a detox.
She does. She says you wake up feeling fresh for the sunrise instead of hungover from a bottle of overpriced Sauvignon Blanc.
Which is probably a good thing, considering the other environmental risks.
Absolutely. That's another safety point they raise. The air is bone dry. You don't realize you're sweating because it evaporates instantly. Combined with the extreme UV index, you can get dehydrated and sick very, very quickly if you aren't constantly drinking water. If you were drinking alcohol on top of that, you'd likely feel terrible.
I want to touch on something Phil mentioned about the Old Town. He called it curated authenticity. This gets right back to that mirage theme we started with.
This is a fascinating sociological point. The Old Town is, by all accounts, beautifully restored. The mud brick buildings, the winding alleys, it looks perfect. It looks like a movie set. But Phil notes that it's filled with high-end candle shops, artisanal coffee roasters, and perfume boutiques.
So not local grandmas selling vegetables or spices.
No. And the locals who used to live there have been moved to a new, modern town nearby. So H describes it as feeling like a museum exhibit rather than a living city. It's beautiful, but it lacks the chaotic, vibrant pulse of a real Middle Eastern souk. It's quiet, it's clean, it's a bit sterile.
It's the difference between the Epcot version of Morocco and actual Morocco.
That's a harsh comparison, but perhaps accurate in terms of the level of curation. It's a presentation of history rather than history itself living and breathing around you.
Okay, but let's get into the highlights. Because despite the costs, the cold, and the curation, both sources admitted there were moments that were genuinely special, truly unforgettable.
Absolutely. We have to give credit where it's due. The hard product delivers in a huge way. H describes the sunrise at Hegra as soul-stirring.
Hegra is the main archaeological site, right? The sister city to Petra in Jordan.
Exactly. And she talks about the tomb of Lihian, son of Kusa, is that iconic 4-story tomb carved into a single standalone rock. H describes standing there with a very small group, watching the sun hit the very top of the rock and just slide down its face like liquid gold.
Wow.
And because the groups are kept so small, a direct result of those high prices and controlled entry, she had a moment of actual solitude with a 2,000-year-old monument.
That is something you absolutely cannot get at the pyramids or Petra these days. You're fighting through crowds of thousands and dodging selfie sticks.
Exactly. The exclusivity, for all its problems, does buy you silence. It buys you a moment of connection that mass tourism almost always destroys.
What about Elephant Rock? I've seen so many pictures of that.
This was a logistical triumph, according to Phil the Cynic. It's a massive natural rock formation that looks uncannily like an elephant. But what impressed Phil wasn't just the rock, it was the setup. They've dug these sunken seating pits into the sand.
Sunken pits.
Yeah, you sit down in a hole in the ground, basically, to view the sunset. And the genius of it is that it prevents all the tables and chairs from ruining the landscape view for everyone else. It's an incredibly smart design.
That is smart.
It is. And even though Phil noted the crowd was all linen pants and designer sunglasses, he had to admit the experience of watching that rock turn deep purple against the twilight sky was magical.
And then there's the Mariah Concert Hall, the giant mirror cube in the desert.
The world's largest mirrored building. Phil, our resident cynic, usually hates what he calls stunt architecture. He thinks it's gimmicky. But even he admitted that this works. It just disappears into the landscape. It reflects the desert back at you. It's a complete mind bender.
So the visual highs are incredibly high. But the letdowns, what were the real letdowns?
The letdowns, almost without exception, were service-based. Those service gaps we talked about. Phil tells this painful story of that $400 dinner where the waiter forgot to bring them water 3 times, and then the expensive steak arrived cold.
Ouch, that hurts.
It just perfectly highlights that clash between Ritz-Carlton prices and a workforce that is incredibly enthusiastic but very new to 5-star luxury standards. And then there was something he called the club atmosphere.
What does he mean by that?
The exclusivity of it all. The crowd is very homogenous, mostly wealthy French tourists and wealthy Saudis. It can feel a little isolating. It can feel like you've walked into a private members club that you aren't quite sure you belong in, or that you've paid way too much to enter for the weekend. It creates this invisible barrier between you and the place itself.
So we have this picture of a place that is visually stunning, historically profound, but logistically a nightmare and incredibly punishingly expensive.
That's a perfect summary.
Which begs the question, are there alternatives?
If I want red rocks and silence, but I don't have $10,000 to drop on a weekend getaway, where do I go?
Phil provides a really helpful comparative analysis here. He stacks AlUla against its main rivals.
Okay, option 1, Wadi Rum, Jordan.
The most obvious competitor. It is literally the same geology, the same kind of rock formations, just a bit further north across the border.
And the price difference is the main thing. It's staggering. Phil says it's about 1/10 of the price. You can stay in one of those cool Martian Dome bubble tents for $150. You can get a Jeep tour for $50.
But there's always a but.
But it is gritty. It can be dirty. And it's crowded. You'll see 500 other Jeeps churning up dust. You'll see trash in the sand in some places. You completely lose that silence and exclusivity. AlUla is the polished, private 5-star version of Wadi Rum.
Okay, option 2. Amangiri in Utah in the U.S.
This is for the American listener who wants that concrete luxury in the rocks aesthetic without the long-haul flight.
But surprisingly, Phil says it's actually more expensive than AlUla, at least the hotel is.
The resort itself is, yes, but the flight is much easier for Americans. And critically, you don't have to stay at Amangiri to see the landscape. You can rent an Airbnb in the nearby town of Moab for cheap and see the same national parks. In AlUla, there is no Airbnb in Moab equivalent yet. You are forced into that top luxury tier.
And the final alternative, Siwa Oasis in Egypt.
This is the authentic alternative. An ancient mud fortress, beautiful salt lakes, a really rich living culture.
Yeah.
A 10-hour bus ride from Cairo. It is very difficult to reach. It is incredibly cheap. You can live on $30 a day, but it completely lacks that luxury infrastructure. It's a trip for the dedicated adventurer, not for someone looking for a relaxing vacation.
So let's bring this all to a final verdict. Who is AlUla actually for? Phil and H created a kind of matrix to figure this out.
Let's run through it. It's pretty clear-cut.
Okay, backpackers.
NO, hard no, the cost, the boredom, the lack of freedom. You will hate it. Don't even think about it.
Families with young kids.
Also in NO. The kids will be bored by the rocks after 10 minutes. The food is too fancy. Right. Bathrooms are too far apart at the sites. It is absolutely not built for toddlers.
Mid-range traveler.
This one's a maybe, but only as a major, once-in-a-lifetime splurge. Phil warns that what your mid-range budget gets you in AlUla would
Hmm.
get you absolute top-tier luxury in a place like Bali or Thailand. So you have to really, really want to see this specific place.
And finally, the luxury traveler.
A definitive yes. For this person, AlUla offers unmatched privacy, a deep sense of history, and a huge exotic factor. It beats the Maldives on history, and it beats Utah on the I went somewhere new and different factor. It's perfect for them.
And they suggest a specific strategy if you do decide to go, the combo strategy.
Right. They say don't just stay in the desert. The real value proposition starts to make sense when you combine 3 days in AlUla with the Red Sea coast, either in Yanbu or one of the resorts. Phil claims the diving there is untouched. Better coral than Egypt because literally nobody has been swimming there for decades.
So let's wrap this up. After all of that, how do we define AlUla? What is it?
I think Phil's definition is the most practical. He calls it a logistics-heavy luxury splurge. It's an expedition, not a casual holiday. You have to plan it like a military operation.
And H calls it a soul-stirring mirage.
And I think that mirage concept is the perfect place to end. AlUla is imperfect, it's confusing, it's astronomically expensive. But the hard product, the silence, the stars, the canyons themselves, that part is real. And by all accounts, it changes you.
It's a place that really forces you to ask, how much is silence worth? How much is history, without the crowds, worth to you?
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to take away. As places like AlUla curate these perfect, pristine experiences for the wealthy, are we moving toward a future where authentic history is only accessible if it's behind a $3,000 a night paywall? Are we, in effect, privatizing the past?
A heavy question to mull over while you check your bank balance.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the desert.
Safe travels.